So let's have you make a sense of what played out over the weekend. Local government elections, not just in Rivers State. It's important to state that. We also had elections in Benue, Akwa Ibom, Jigawa. All of these states had local government elections. And well, what we saw was really not different from what we've been seeing in times past. But the Rivers situation is quite peculiar, as well as what we saw in other states, really. So we have joining us on the show this morning, Professor of Political Science and International Relations, Nasarawa State University, founder, Adonis and Abbey Publishers, Professor Jidofo Adibe. Professor Adibe, you're welcome to the Morning Brief.
Thank you very much.
I know, with what you've seen, I just want to set a background. You know, months ago, a lot of Nigerians celebrated that Supreme Court judgment granting financial autonomy, and they said, way to go. This is going to birth a change in local government administration and all of that. And we've seen states conduct local government elections previous weeks, months, and the rest. Would you say that maybe people celebrated too early with what you're seeing play out with these elections, or the celebration was in order?
Well, I wasn't among those who celebrated.
Right.
No. I just thought, one, it amounted to what in Babangida days they call a little to the left and a little to the right. There's a conflicting tendency in the Tinubu administration. So it seems sometimes to do things that contradict one another. There are forces that are pushing for, let's go back to what they call true federalism, which is, you know, there's nothing like true federalism, but just federalism as obtained in the First Republic. And there are also those who are pushing for greater centralization. So now what he has done is, okay, for those who are talking about greater centralization, I give you this local government autonomy. Because it doesn't make sense if you are really going back to old regionalism. It doesn't make sense. I actually believe that the State Independent Electoral Commission is no different from INEC. And historically, they sweep all the polls. So my own fear, again at that time, was probably it was a contrivance by the government. So if they were able to push through for INEC to organize the local government elections, then they will put their own people, and by so doing, control the structures. So now what this has established is that the governors are supremos at the state level. So if I were Wike, and Wike should learn from history, each time anyone fights a sitting governor, the person loses. If you go, for example, Obaseki versus Shomole, you go to Wodo versus Sullivan, there's never been an instant. The only time I can remember a sitting governor lost was under Chinwe Mbadiniju in Anambra State. Even then, he won all the primaries. But because of the person of Obasanjo said, no, you didn't perform. You know, the schools were closed for several months, and they put their foot down on the ground and made sure he lost. And he didn't get the primary. Otherwise, this is really, you know, it just signals that nothing has changed.
The more things change, the more they remain the same.
It hasn't really changed. Even when you call it reform, it's not really reform, because they were a rehearsal of what Babangida did in 1986.
Oh dear. So we saw Rivers State. Even though the governor said his party lost, right? But we know the adopted party, APP won, 22, AA won. People were saying, maybe
they were generous enough to concede
to give one at least.
Benue State, Akwa Ibom, they weren't that generous. They just took everything.
Well, Akwa Ibom, the APC won. In fact, it was in
Benue that they took everything.
Exactly, the Senate President's local government, the APC won, but PDP took everything. In Jigawa as well, APC won everything. Benue as well, the ruling party won everything.
Now, for strategists, for if I were wicked now, because Tinubu will now start to think, if I'm coming for re-election and the governors still have the key to the rigging machine, and between Governor Wike and between Wike, well, I don't know the role he's supposed to play in the FCT, and the Governor Fubara, who will I lean more? You know, politicians don't think like us. So I won't be surprised if at a point Somebody is sacrificed for another, because the goal, if they do their own strategic calculations and feel that, well, we need to get to Rivers is more important than FCT, I cannot count on the North, somebody may go.
So, very interesting point you make here. Who has more political value in that sense? Or can the president play, because this is politics at the end of the day, politicians think differently, and we'll get to that point, but I want you to speak to this. Can the president play both of them? Can he try to maintain both relationships? Will that harm his own government? Or he has to make a decision, if he should, who has more political value?
Well, first of all, they look at the number of votes available. They look at certain places that are ideologically led. There are certain parts of the country where your mago everything may not work. For example, during the Buhari days before he became president and lost that halo, if you try to rig in Buhari's domain or manipulate, they'll set you ablaze. His supporters. So you know that those areas are ideologically motivated. So you have to be reasonable. River State, so I won't be surprised if these politicians are supporting both sides secretly. And that's why we say, what's the essence of these elections? We need to reimagine our politics. And that's why they talk about illiberal democracy. Illiberal democracy, where you still observe those rituals that are associated with liberal democracy, rituals like election, whereas in actual sense, they are not taking place. So what's the essence of, periodically organizing an election, spending a lot of money, only for you to just use that to legitimize a set of people who are already a priori chosen?
And that takes me to the next point, really. By the way, the president has said he is not thinking about 2027.
He's not going to tell you. That statement is also political.
Right. Because you know these people well enough, right? It's your field. But let's get to what then? Because the people now, this is what you find people doing. Either by their own admission or omission, by their doing or otherwise, you find them queuing behind political leaders. For example, the Rivers case, the current governor and the minister of the FCT. And a lot of people all of a sudden saying, you know what, no, allow Fubara do his thing. And they queue behind Fubara. And some other people are saying, you people should take a moment and think about this. First, this is politics. You don't know what kind of agreements they had prior to this. You don't even know the root of this drama. So for the people out there, a lot of them who just want to support somebody, they want good governance, should they begin to rethink and maybe reassess their engagement with these people? One, understanding that for the average politician, it's a hold on power for them and not governance.
I don't think really if we say politicians, we just have to call it that this is not working. The liberal democracy, as we know it, is not working. If we want to reimagine our politics, for example, when people start to give an example of leaders that are very transformative, you will hear them mention Lee Kuan Yew, you mention Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia, even Paul Kagame. And if you look at the period these people have stayed in office, Lee Kuan Yew was 31 years, Mahathir Mohamad was 24 years, Paul Kagame has been there since 2000, and prior to that, the 6 years before, he was vice president, but effectively the president. So what is common to them is longevity. Nigerians are alienated from politics today as we know it. You can just think of the number of your friends you call and say, what's happening? They say, look, I'm not interested. Or people are just not interested. This will not save us. So the hope for many people is that we'll get at a point, somebody who will, because the recruitment system is structured in such a way that unless you have deep pockets, unless you have rough edges, you cannot come into the system. So there's simply no room. So the hope for many people is therefore that somebody who knows the system can come up and commit what we call class suicide and radicalize himself and then make some changes.
Very interesting proposals there. I don't know if you are pushing for the third term agenda kind of thing. People should stay longer in power so they can effect some more change.
I have my own thoughts on that. At the federal level, for example, I've argued that we need a collegial system. One, since part of the reasons for the anarchical structure of our politics is the fear that if you win, you will use state power to privilege yourself and your in-groups, ethnic and religious in-groups, and disadvantage the others. So how do we solve that problem? I suggested, let's get a collegial system where each of the 6 political zones, we have 6 of them, and they take turns. 2 years, others become deputy. Take 2 years. By the time they go round, it will become 12 years. So we get a long break from politics. Because what we see is every 4 years, you organize elections that are not really, they are just shambolic. At the same time, because elections tend to be wars without weapons anywhere in the world. Now, after 2 years, you open so many wounds. They are not even properly healed. Next time you start another round of election. So what it does is to put the nation building process in abeyance. At the same time as you don't accomplish anything.